Hello, you're watching the MTDC Technopreneur Coffee Chat with me, Rizal Zulkapli, and today we'll talk about the Industry 4.0. Now, to understand what Industry 4.0 is, let's look at the historical aspect of it. Let's look at the fourth industrial revolution. Now, according to the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, the fourth industrial revolution is a stage that builds upon the third revolution, which is the digital revolution that started in the middle of the last century. Now, the fourth industrial revolution is characterized by a fusion of technologies that is blurring the lines between the fast or the physical, digital, and also the biological spheres. Now, this revolution is fast and disrupting everything, everywhere, and changing the entire system from production to management and governance. And how can we, as a nation, take part in this new development, and how should we prepare ourselves to face the changes and challenges that will happen with Industry 4.0? Now, with us today, we have three technopreneurs who will share the experience in their respective fields as to how they plan to move forward with their organizations in Industry 4.0. So let me introduce the technopreneurs that we have on our program today. We have Najib Muhammad Noor, Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of Strand Aerospace Malaysia. Strand specializes in aerospace, mechanical and civil engineering, and they build and business consultancy and training. And we have Nur Azam Malim, founder and CEO of Twistcode Technologies Riam Berhad. Twistcode is a high-performance computing solutions provider, and they build supercomputers in Malaysia. And we have Jimmy Liu, Managing Director, Evolve Technologies Riam Berhad. Evolve provides data protection solutions in Malaysia with more than 17 years of experience. Hi, thank you for joining us. Now, with that long experience and with that very, I think you understand the breadth and depth of the industry. Maybe you can share with us, when people discuss Industry 4.0, I think we always focus on its components. We've got big data, we've got blockchain, we've got all these different components. But we don't have the long-term and the ultimate goal for this country, for Malaysia. What do you think should be the ultimate goal, and how should we craft this ultimate goal so that we have this big narrative, so that if I were to set up a company and I want to be part of the Industry 4.0, I know what my long-term goal is. What is that ultimate goal in your opinion?
Okay, I think we have to look beyond technology. Technology has always been there. First it was computing, digitalization. Now we are moving into the fourth industrial revolution. It has to do with machines becoming more human. Okay, there are many components there, and I mean, for a country, ultimately is to create a high-income society, developed society, and inclusive society. From the government country's point of view, there's a lot of things to prepare for the fourth industrial revolution. One of them is to encourage the industry to automate, to be part of the global value chain, supply chain. If not, we'll be left behind, we'll miss the boat. So we don't want to do that. So we have to take some drastic decision, and quick one, because the fourth industrial revolution is not going to be slowly progressing. It's going to happen, and one day we wake up, it's there, and we are not prepared, you know. So there are a lot of things to prepare ourselves for that, in terms of getting the industries to be more productive and more competitive, so that there can be global players in the world stage, to get our people, our young people, to be ready. Because if not, there'll be a mismatch between what they know and what the industries need. They may graduate, they may have a degree in the future, but they can't get a job. So it'll be a sad situation and disaster when that happens.
I just want to pick on what you said earlier, which is humanizing this whole Industry 4.0, because I think we always talk about robotics, we always talk about the automation, the mechanical part of the Industry 4.0, but we seldom focus on who do we want to be behind this robotics, this automation. How do we humanize that, Azam?
Well, as a start, during when I was so-called appointed by MTDC as one of the jury for the robotic pitching session, ironically, out of 17 people, only 1 or 2 who can apply the robots for the public usage. For example, the robot man used for blind people or autistic people. But the other 16 just want to compete who can produce the cheapest robot parts component. They are always pitching about how to produce the cheaper parts, how to produce the fastest turnover, the ROI, return of investment, how 4-5 years. But not even one of them try to emphasize on long term, just like you said before. So that is the robotic part. So also on the supercomputing part, there's a lot of supercomputer in Malaysia actually, in local universities, public universities, there are about maybe 14 or 15. But of course, from there, it's a matter of how to make useful of the whatever they have. For example, every now and then, the master students, the PhD students, can't even install a proper printer driver, right? So they keep on installing, and the new batch of students coming in, and they have to do it all over again. So they wasted a lot of time, very meaningful resources, instead of put those in repository so that the future student can learn, and instead of spending a lot of time just to figure out how the printer works, they can do that more meaningful way for the supercomputing part. Do the more research, focus on the producing more meaningful research using whatever technology they have. It's not that the infra is not there. The infra is there. So on the first approach, when they don't so-called love the machines, how it works, you cannot produce anything more than that. For example, like we do, we taught each our staff, even the bioinformaticians, finance, engineering, programmers, learn how to love the machines by assembling the parts, how to make sure it works perfectly, so that they know what they are going after, what they program. The programming part, they know what's the output going to be. So without so-called the love for the machine, they won't even have the meaningful part of their output part.
When it comes to what you do, you specialize in aerospace and in civil, in mechanical engineering, you've got business consultancy, you've got trainings. How do you see the two of those ideas helping us in Industry 4.0? And what is that long-term strategy and long-term goal that we need for Malaysia specifically, based on the strengths that you see we have?
Okay, so I prefer to think about 4.0 as a market opportunity, right? So we talk a lot about the technologies, right, and then the people enabling these new technologies in new markets. But what we've not really looked at is what is the market going to be like. And when we look at the markets, there's a lot of as-a-service type of business models which are emerging. So before, where you were producing a good and then selling the good, and somebody would take that home with them, now people may not own things, they may just have a service provided to them. So you had things like software as a service evolving in the early days. Today you're going towards manufacturing as a service, almost, so that products are no longer owned. You take them away and you pay a service fee, and then you recycle them back and when you don't use them, or you get upgraded, right? So when we try and bring these things together, the aerospace industry is a high mix, low volume industry of a very stringent certification requirement. So the products that we produce are technologically advanced, but extremely safe, right? Because you have to fly people in the air. And we're producing them at a higher rate. Having said that, an aircraft versus a car is parked maybe 85% of the day. An aircraft, if you fly in Air Asia, for example, you'll see it won't sit on the runway for more than 30 minutes to 45 minutes. So it's a nearly 100% utilization of an asset. And more that will be what will happen. You will not have cars that you own and put in a parking lot. These things will run around and pick other people up and so on and so forth, and their utilization will come up to that 100%. So what's happening now with the business model? It's a service business model. So I think the people need to understand that that's the business model that we are enabling, because that's the kind of consumption the new consumer is looking at, right? A much more aware consumer. And then when you look at the way that you enable that, you have to then master these technologies, which themselves will be evolving as well. So I think that kind of frames the whole scenario that we're going after now.
This is the MTDC Technopreneur Coffee Chat. Let's take a short break. We'll come back with more insights into Industry 4.0. Hi, welcome back. You're watching MTDC Technopreneur Coffee Chat with me, Rizal Zulkapli, and we're discussing Industry 4.0. Let's move on. Najib, you mentioned the services, creating a services or market to support the services sector moving forward. But what kind of human capital is needed for us to achieve this long-term goal? Because I'm sure you mentioned in your industry, you deal with aerospace, you deal with civil, mechanical engineering. This requires the best human capital possible to ensure the safety of people up in the air. So how do you do that, and how do you create the best human capital? Because I think we all know that universities can create the best human capital, but how do you train them to ensure that they are future-proof?
Yeah, so you can't actually future-proof a person from the outset. Okay, so I think that's certainly a myth, and I think Jimmy alluded to that. It's a continuous process, and therefore the process of education therefore will not be in two phases again, as Jimmy pointed out. Apprenticeships are going to be much more important. So at Strand, for example, we apply that to sort of the design level engineers. The technology that we have to apply for the latest aircraft and so on and so forth, these kind of things need to be learnt as we go along, right? So we don't set anything in stone. But having said that, we have to have very capable people that can manipulate multiple parameters, right? Because an aircraft has to be light, it has to be strong, it has to be fast, but it has to be also very economical. So these very juxtaposing positions mean that the engineers have to be highly attuned to optimizing solutions, right? That also does mean that they have to collaborate globally effectively. So communication is of the utmost importance. And I think going forward, that's quite a universal theme in the Fourth Industrial Revolution.
Jimmy, communication, collaboration, going global, this I'm sure requires policies which will enable people, which will enable organizations to move forward in that direction. You have to create organizations which are global ready in that sense. How do we do that, and what kind of policies do we need to ensure that that happens really, really fast?
I think the government and the private sector can each play a very important role in this. Government can come up with policies to encourage industry to automate, to encourage, to facilitate adoption of these emerging technologies to increase the productivity. The private sector should learn to reskill their workers. This is something which I believe very strongly that private sector should be the engine of growth, you know, and not just depend on government, right? We have such a big and vibrant private sector. If the instruction goes out to them and say, each of you should play a part in trying to upskill your workers.
Is it because they also understand what the industry,
what
right. Their fields are
They're
going
closest
through?
to the industry. They know their needs far greater, better than government, you know, and they can start to upskill, invest in the workers, in the human capital, so that they can be an asset to the company, so that the value to the company can always be there, you know.
Sorry, I think Azam, the fear is that this will become another white elephant if we don't do this well. If we don't provide the human capital, the best human capital for this, if we don't have the best policies to move this forward. How do we avoid that? And how do we ensure that we lay the best foundations for us to move forward in Industry 4.0 and that this will materialize and not just become a rhetoric and buzzwords for us to move forward with?
Well, we've come along from big data, you know, parallel computing, supercomputing, grid computing. The latest one would be the AI, the blockchain. So there's a lot of acronym that came into, I mean, most of us here in the business more than 10 years, right? So there's a lot of acronym come and go. So this time we won't let that acronym just slip away just like that. So as a start, just like Mr. Jimmy said regarding that, we won't wait for the government to lead. This should be led by the private sectors. So for example, there's a for the past 10 years, there's no supercomputer name Malaysia in the top 500 supercomputer in the world. So we managed to do that, although we have to apologize to Malaysian because we just slipped, I think about 2-3 hours past deadline to submit top 500 supercomputer in the world, to put the Malaysia's name on that. As you know, for the past 10 years, there's no Malaysian name in top 500 supercomputer in the world. So before we embark IR 4.0, there's a need to start with the IR 2.0, 3.0, and so on. Grab doesn't explode if there's no proper roads, right? So also that there's no AI if there's no proper foundation of the supercomputing. So we don't have any receive or get any grants to do to get ourselves listed Malaysia, to put Malaysia's name in top 500 supercomputer in the world. But we try our best to use resources we have, use our own revenues supported by MTDC, just to get our name inside top 500, so that every time people look at us, yes, there's a supercomputing in Malaysia as a start. Then from there, there's of course, continuity on the AI, on the blockchain and what's not. So from there, people will see that there's a basic foundation. Before you have autonomous car, you have a proper roads.
Okay.
Before you have the AI, you have a good computing environment, supercomputing environment. So in order to push that that solid foundation, then only then maybe perhaps the Ministry of Education can see this foundation has been laid by the private sectors beautifully enough, so that the government can to settle the human resources, right? The human capital, the skillful, instead of waiting for Malaysian abroad to come back, or we have to import some skilled foreigners come to Malaysia. It's a long road for us to start from the beginning of the students, skillful enough, supported by this foundation that we lay right now and ongoing for the next few years. We hope that this journey, hopefully this will be the embark of IR 4.0, that we won't let this one big acronym slip our tongue again.
We'll take another short break. When we come back, let's talk about how your different organizations have built your businesses to where it is today, and what is that one thing that you want people out there to learn and to ensure that if you get this right, you will be able to be a part of this Industry 4.0. Let's talk about that after this on MTDC Technopreneur Coffee Chat. Hi, you're still watching the MTDC Technopreneur Coffee Chat with me, Rizal Zulkapli, and we're discussing Industry 4.0. How can we learn from other countries, other organizations? How can we get people to help us? Because I think there's no point reinventing the wheel. You need help and support from organizations like MTDC, and you can learn from other countries that are doing and living and breathing the Industry 4.0 really well. How can we do that briefly, Jimmy?
Of course, we can see many examples of countries that are doing very well for the 4.0. In fact, take the example of China and India. You know, they are trying to position themselves as technology leaders. They have got this program called Made in China 2025. It's a 10-year program which they launched in 2015, in which they will automate, they use all the latest technologies like robotics and artificial intelligence to reinvent many of the industries, including like aerospace. You know, they've got a big aviation industry, healthcare, and so on. So the kind of technology they develop will be seamlessly integrated into all these different industries. And it is a very ambitious plan. Of course, not every country is excited about their plan, because that would mean that they'll lose to China in the future. You know, but it's a good plan by the government. You know, that's something that's stir the imagination of the people and the industry, you know, so that people have a vision to follow and go and to achieve, something to achieve, you know. So one of the examples of the 2025 Made in China program is they want to substitute the foreign products by up to 70% by 2025, 40% by 2020, and 70% by 2025. So they want to produce their own local products. So I think this is very important. We Malaysians are very good at consuming foreign technology, you know. But I think to be a major player in the fourth industrial revolution, you got to have a mindset to produce technological products, not just user of products.
Najib, what's your response to that? How do you respond to that? And you know, seeing that you are in the business of making and producing parts and services for aerospace, how do we expand that and ensure that things around us can also have that made in Malaysia high-tech production to it? So instead of just getting stuff from overseas, how do we ensure that we can also?
So from my point of view, right, I'd take a quantum leap even further, and I'd say, let's not think about products. We think about, again, the market. And this Southeast Asian market, we should say, is our market. And when I said products as a service now, and this is our market to service. So if I relate the conversation I had with the top engineer in Airbus, they said the way that Airbus is thinking about transportation today is that it's a seat. And that seat may be on a plane, it may be on a Hyperloop, it can be on anything. But whatever it is, Airbus will be involved. So they have reduced their business down to a seat that provides a service. And that seat in Southeast Asia is our seat. And therefore, these must be our services and our products that service this market, and we should claim this market.
And Azam, you mentioned something really interesting earlier, and I want to bring that up again, which is to ensure that this growth and this goal moving forward is meaningful. Moving forward, how do you see adding that meaning to Industry 4.0 to ensure that whatever you create and whatever you build will indeed serve people and answer life's biggest questions, like how do you cure cancer? How do you provide the best healthcare for people in the future? How do you do that?
Actually, the most basic part would be how we want to see things that is already in front of us. If I put one big mirror in front of us, for us right now, I see a very potential client next to me, Mr. Najib, in aerospace, supercomputing, that's that heavily. And then Mr. Jimmy over here in the security, we also provide AI, using the computing power not only to enhance the business, but also for them to have the opportunity to do more research, to widen the market outside. So I would be happy enough if I put one big mirror right now in front of us and see that's the one that we are looking at, is us. So if we want to teach other people, then we have to teach ourselves first how to communicate well, and MTDC provide this good opportunity. I am very happy today because next to me I have two potential clients directly. So this is the IR 4.0. So we only start from 2.0, from the electronics, to 3.0 supercomputing. And these two guys already on the 4.0 part, which we need, we can help them to boost up their maybe perhaps IR 5.0 later on, that we might still stick to the 3.0, but this guy venture out. So it doesn't mean that we still, the person who solidifying their so-called their experts in 3.0 can move to 4.0. It doesn't mean like that. But we enhancing the person who deal with 4.0 to move forward 5.0. So we have our own responsibility. We have to look ourselves in each mirror, how far we want to go and how far we want to help other people.
On that note, we thank you all three very much for being here, for being on the MTDC Technopreneur Coffee Chat and sharing with us your thoughts and ideas on Industry 4.0 and how we as a country, as a nation can move forward towards Industry 4.0. I'm Rizal Zulkapli and this is the MTDC Technopreneur Coffee Chat, bringing you discussions on Industry 4.0. Thank you very much.